On this episode of Just Informed Talk, we're going to look back at today's hearing with Attorney General Barr, and we're going to examine the key parts of the hearings, the highlights, and of course, the lowlights. But you guys are going to want to watch this and put it in context with everything we know now. You guys are going to want to check this out. Enjoy.
Campaign. The other campaign was investigated not by Mr. Mueller, by people within the Department of Justice. The accusation against the Secretary Clinton, was that she set a private server up somewhere in her house and classified information was on it to avoid the disclosure requirements and the transparency requirements required of being Secretary of State. So that was investigated. What do we know? We know that the person in charge of investigating hated Trump's guts. I don't know how Mr. Mueller felt about Trump, but I don't think anybody on our side believes that he had a personal animosity toward the president to the point he couldn't do his job. This is what Strzok said on February the 12th, 2016. Now, he's in charge of the Clinton email investigation. Oh, Trump's abysmal. I keep hoping the charade will end and people will just dump him. February the 12th, 2016. Page is the Department of Justice lawyer assigned to this case. March 3rd, 2016. God, Trump is a loathsome human being. Strzok. Oh my God. Trump's an idiot. Page, he's awful. Strzok. God, Hillary should win 100 million to nothing. Compare those two people to Mueller. March 16th, 2016. I cannot believe Trump is likely to be an actual serious candidate for president. July the 21st, 2016. Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be. August the 8th, 2016. 3 days before Strzok was made deputy acting in charge of the counterintelligence division of the FBI. He's never going to become president, right? Page to Strzok. No, he won't. We'll stop him. These are the people investigating the Clinton email situation and start the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign. Compare them to Mueller. August the 15th, 2016. Strzok. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected, but I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. August 26, 2016. Just went to the Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell the Trump support. October the 19th, 2016. Trump is a idiot. He's unable to provide a coherent answer. Sorry to the kids out there. These are the people that made a decision that Clinton didn't do anything wrong, and a counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign was warranted. We're going to, in a bipartisan way, I hope, deal with Russia. But when the Mueller report is put to bed, and it soon will be, this committee is going to look long and hard at how this all started. We're going to look at the FISA warrant process. Did Russia provide Christopher Steele the information about Trump that turned out to be garbage that was used to get a warrant on an American citizen? And if so, how did the system fail? Was there a real effort between Papadopoulos and anybody in Russia to use the Clinton emails stole by the Russians, or was that thought planted in his mind? I don't know, but we're going to look. And I can tell you this, if you change the names, y'all would want to look too. Everything I just said, just substitute Clinton for Trump. See what all these people with cameras would be saying out here about this. As to cooperation in the Clinton investigation, I told you what the Trump people did. I'll tell you a little bit about what the Clinton people did. There was a protective order for the server issued by the House, and there was a request by the State Department to preserve all the information on the server. Paul Gambetta, after having the protective order, used a software program called BleachBit to wipe this email server clean. Has anybody ever heard of Paul Gambetta? No. Under protective order from the House to preserve the information, under a request from the State Department to preserve the information on the server, he used a BleachBit program to wipe it clean. What happened to him? Nothing. 18 devices possessed by Secretary Clinton she used to do business as secretary. How many of them were turned over to the FBI? None. 2 of them couldn't be turned over because Judith Casper took a hammer and destroyed 2 of them. What happened to her? Nothing. So the bottom line is, we're about to hear from Mr. Barr the results of a 2-year investigation into the Trump campaign, all things Russia, the actions the president took before and after the campaign, $25 million, 40 FBI agents. I appreciate very much what Mr. Mueller did for the country. I have read most of the report. For me, it is over. So, very quickly, give us your reasoning why you think it would be inappropriate to proceed forward on obstruction of justice in this case.
Well, generally speaking, an obstruction case typically has 2 aspects to it. One, there's usually an underlying criminality that's
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Was there an underlying crime here?
No,
So
Okay.
usually there is.
usually. But it's not necessary, but
Right.
the typical case, sort of the paradigmatic case is
Right.
there's an underlying crime, and then the person implicated or people implicated are concerned about that criminality being discovered, take an inherently malignant act, as the Supreme Court has said, to obstruct that investigation,
So
such
one
as
of the
destroying
examples
documents.
that people were worried about, that he fired Comey to stop the Russian investigation. That's one of the concerns people had. Let me tell you a little bit about Comey. I do not have confidence in him, Comey, any longer. That was Chuck Schumer, November the 2nd, 2016. I think he, Comey, should take a hard look at what he has done, and I think it would not be a bad thing for the American people if he did step down. Bernie Sanders, January the 15th, 2017. The president ought to fire Comey immediately, and he ought to initiate an investigation. That is Congressman Nadler, November the 14th, 2016. Did you have a problem with the way Comey handled the Clinton email investigation?
Yes, I said so at the time.
Okay. So, given the fact that a lot of people Comey should be fired, did you find that to be a persuasive act of obstructing justice?
No. I think even the report at the end of the day came to the conclusion, if you read the analysis, that a reason that loomed large there for his termination was his refusal to tell the public what he was privately telling the president, which was that the president was not under investigation.
As to where we go forward, as to how we go forward, would you recommend that this committee and every other committee of Congress do our best to harden our infrastructure against future Russian attacks?
Absolutely,
Do you
yes.
think Russia is still up to it?
Yes,
Do you think other countries may get involved in our elections in 2020?
yes,
So you would support an effort by Congress working with the administration to harden our electoral infrastructure?
yes,
Is that one of the takeaways of the Mueller report?
yes,
Do you share my concerns about the FISA warrant process?
yes,
Do you share my concerns about the counterintelligence investigation, how it was opened and why it was opened?
yes,
Do you share my concerns that the lack of professionalism in the Clinton email investigation is something we should all look at?
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bart, I commend your candor in calling what happened in 2016 what it is, which is spying the Trump campaign and spying on the President of the United States. I'd like to talk a little bit more about spying. Counterintelligence investigations like the one that we now know the FBI launched against maybe candidate Trump and President Trump, those are designed to thwart spying and sabotage. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To your knowledge, has the FBI ever launched a counterintelligence investigation of another president that you're aware of?
Not to my knowledge.
So it's safe to say that to your knowledge, this move was completely unprecedented.
To my knowledge.
Would it be unusual, in your experience and to your knowledge, for FBI agents to hide the existence and results of an investigation, such an investigation, from their superiors?
Did you say, would it be typical?
No, would it be unusual for
Very
them?
unusual.
Yes. And in fact, that is indeed what press reports suggest happened here. When FBI officials hide investigations from superiors, is there anybody to hold them accountable? I mean, what happens in that instance?
There is no accountability.
Have you looked into the decision by the FBI into why they launched a counterintelligence investigation?
I am looking into it, and I have looked into it.
And will you commit to telling us what you find as the result of your own review and investigation?
Well, at the end of the day, when I form conclusions, I intend to share it.
I'll take that as a yes. Let me ask you about the 25th Amendment, if I might, for just a moment. We know that former acting director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, he's publicly confirmed that he contemplated forcing the president from office using the 25th Amendment. To your knowledge, have FBI officials ever contemplated forcing any other president from office against his will using that provision?
Not to my knowledge.
The 25th Amendment contemplates the vice president taking over as president when the president is unable to act. Would you agree that that text contemplates physical ailments like a coma, mental incapacitation, not just political differences of opinion?
Yes.
Have you ever doubted, since you have been in your current position, whether this president is physically able, in a constitutional sense, to discharge his duties as president?
No.
Would you agree that discussions within the FBI of forcing the president out of office for political reasons gives the public, at best, reason to question what the FBI is doing and to fear that there may be abuses of power in that organization?
I think it gives reason to be concerned about those particular individuals that were involved. I don't attribute it to the organization.
Speaking of particular individuals who are involved, I have to say, I've listened to this testimony all day today, and to me, maybe the most shocking thing I've heard is this. Chairman read it earlier. August 26th, 2016. This is a text message from Peter Strzok, a top counterintelligence investigator who we now know helped launch this counter-spy investigation of the President of the United States. Peter Strzok says, just went to a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell the Trump support. Smell is capitalized. Just went to a Southern Virginia Walmart. I could smell the Trump support. My view, you want to know what's really going on here? You want to know why the counterintelligence investigation really happened? You want to know why we're all really sitting here today? That's why, right there. Is because an unelected bureaucrat, an unelected official in this government who clearly has open disdain, if not outright hatred, for Trump voters, like the people of my state, for instance. I could smell the Trump support, then tried to overturn the results of a Democratic election. That's what's really gone on here. That's the story. That's why we're here today. I cannot believe that a top official of this government, with the kind of power that these people had, would try to exercise their own prejudices, and that's what this is. It's open, blatant prejudice, would try to use that in order to overturn a democratic election. And to my mind, that's the real crisis here. And it is a crisis, because if there's not accountability, if this can go on in the United States of America, well then my goodness gracious, we don't have a democracy anymore. So I appreciate your leadership, Mr. Attorney General. I look forward to hearing the results of your investigation, and I look forward to this committee continuing its constitutional responsibility to find out what is going on here and making sure that the will of the people is vindicated and established. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barr, now the American people know that you are no different from Rudy Giuliani or Kellyanne Conway or any of the other people who sacrificed their once decent reputation for the grifter and liar who sits in the Oval Office. You once turned down a job offer from Donald Trump to represent him as his private attorney. At your confirmation hearing, you told Senator Feinstein that, quote, the job of Attorney General is not the same as representing, end quote, the president. So you know the difference, but you've chosen to be the president's lawyer and side with him over the interests of the American people. To start with, you should never have been involved in supervising the Robert Mueller investigation. You wrote a 19-page unsolicited memo, which you admit was not based on any facts, attacking the premise of half of the investigation. And you also should have insisted that Deputy Attorney General Rob Rosenstein recuse himself. He wasn't just a witness to some of the president's obstructive behavior. We now know he was in frequent personal contact with the president, a subject of the investigation. You should have left it to career officials. Then, once the report was delivered by the special counsel, you delayed its release for more than 2 weeks. You let the president's personal lawyers look at it before you even deigned to let Congress or the public see it. During the time, you substituted your own political judgment for the special counsel's legal conclusions in a 4-page letter to Congress. And now we know, thanks to a free press, that Mr. Mueller wrote your letter objecting to your so-called summary. When you called Mueller to discuss his letter, the reports are that he thought your summary was giving the press, Congress, and the public a misleading impression of his work. He asked you to release the report summaries to correct the misimpression you created, but you refused. When you finally did decide to release the report over a congressional recess and on the eve of 2 major religious holidays, you called a press conference to once again try to clear Donald Trump before anyone had a chance to read the special counsel's report and come to their own conclusions. But when we read the report, we knew Robert Mueller's concerns were valid and that your version of events was false. You used every advantage of your office to create the impression that the president was cleared of misconduct. You selectively quoted fragments from the special counsel's report, taking some of the most important statements out of context and ignoring the rest. You put the power and authority of the Office of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice behind a public relations effort to help Donald Trump protect himself. Finally, you lied to Congress. You told Representative Charlie Crist that you didn't know what objections Mueller's team might have to your March 24th so-called summary. You told Senator Chris Van Hollen that you didn't know if Bob Mueller supported your conclusions, but you knew. You lied. And now we know. A lot of respected nonpartisan legal experts and elected officials were surprised by your efforts to protect the president. But I wasn't surprised. You did exactly what I thought you'd do. It's why I voted against your confirmation. I expected you would try to protect the president, and indeed you did. In 1989, this isn't something you hadn't done before. In 1989, when you refused to show Congress an OLC opinion that led to the arrest of Manuel Noriega. In 1992, when you recommended pardons for the subjects of the Iran-Contra scandal. And last year, when you wrote the 19-page memo telling Donald Trump, as president, can't be guilty of obstruction of justice, and then didn't recuse yourself from the matter. From the beginning, you were addressing an audience of one, that person being Donald Trump. That's why, before the bombshell news of yesterday evening, 11 of my Senate colleagues and I called on the Department of Justice Inspector General and Office of Professional Responsibility to investigate the way you have handled the Mueller report. I wanted them to determine whether your actions have complied with the department's policies and practices, and whether you have demonstrated sufficient impartiality to continue to oversee the 14 other criminal matters that the special counsel referred to in other parts of the Department of Justice. But now, we know more about your deep involvement in trying to cover up for Donald Trump. Being Attorney General of the United States is a sacred trust. You have betrayed that trust. America deserves better. You should resign. I have some questions for you. Is the White House exerting any influence on your decision whether to allow Special Counsel Mueller to testify in Congress, and when?
No.
Now, you've been clear today that you don't think that any of the 10 episodes of possible obstruction that the special counsel outlined is a crime. I disagree. But you seem to think that if it's not a crime, then there's no problem. Nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. So, with apologies to Adam Schiff, do you think all of the things that President Trump did are okay? Are they what the President of the United States should be doing? For example, do you think it's okay for a president to fire an FBI director to stop him from investigating links between his campaign and Russia? It may not be a crime, but do you think it's okay?
Well, I think the report is clear that.
No, I'm not talking about the report and its analysis of whether a crime occurred. I'm asking you.
I don't think
This is
the
not a
evidence
crime, but do
supports-
you think it's okay for the president to do what he did, to fire the special
I
counsel
do think it's
to
okay
keep
for
them
the
from
president to do
investigating?
what he did, and I don't think the evidence supports the proposition.
So I guess you
that
think it's okay.
To stop the investigation.
Do you think it's okay for a president to ask his White House counsel to lie?
Well, I'm willing to talk about what's criminal. but
No,
I-
but we've already acknowledged that you think it was not a crime. I'm just asking whether you think it's okay. Even if it's not a crime, do you think it's okay for the president to ask his White House counsel to lie?
Which.
Look, if you're just going to go back to whether
No,
or
which
not it's a
event are you
crime, you're
talking
telling me that
Which
it's
event
okay.
are
Let
you
me ask
talking
you
about?
the last question that I have in 17 seconds. Do you think it's okay for a president to offer pardons to people who don't testify against him, to threaten the family of someone who does? Is that okay?
When did he offer a pardon to someone?
I think
in
you
order
know
not to
what I'm talking about.
truth?
Please,
What do you mean?
please, Mr. Attorney General, give us some credit for knowing what the hell is going on around here with you.
Not really. To this line of questioning.
So,
Listen, you slandered this man.
Yeah, what I sort of
Every
want to
way
know
you
is
can
how do we get to this point?
Yeah,
I do
And
not think
so
that
how do
I'm
we get to the
slandering
point where the-
anyone.
All
How
I
did we-
can say.
Mr.
I give
Chairman,
you 7
I am
minutes,
done. Thank you very much.
And you slandered this man from top to bottom. So if you want more of this, you're not going to get it. If you want to ask him questions, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Barr, thank you for your testimony. And let me start by just saying thank you. You've had an extraordinarily successful legal career. You didn't have to take this job. And you stepped forward and answered the call yet again, knowing full well that you would be subject to the kind of slanderous treatment, the Kavanaugh treatment, that we have seen of senators impugning your integrity. And I, for one, am grateful that you answered that call and are leading the Department of Justice both with integrity and fidelity to law. That is what the nation rightly expects of our Attorney General, and I believe you are performing that very ably. I think this hearing today has been quite revealing to anyone watching it, although perhaps not for the reason some of the Democratic senators intended. One thing that's revealing in the discussion and questions that came up, a word that occurred almost none at all, is the word Russia. For 2.5 years, we heard Democratic senators going on and on and on about Russia collusion. We heard journalists going on and on and on about Russia collusion, alleging, among other things, some using extreme rhetoric, calling the president a traitor. We heard very little of that in this hearing today. Instead, the principal attack that Democratic senators have marshaled upon you concerns this March 27th letter from Robert Mueller. And it's an attack that I want people to understand just how revealing it is. If this is their whole argument, they ain't got nothing. So their argument is as follows, and let me see if I understand it correctly. You initially, when you received the Mueller report, released to Congress and the public a 4-page summary of the conclusions. Then on March 27th, Mr. Mueller asked you to release an additional 19 pages, the introduction and summary that he had drafted. And indeed, in the letter, what he says is, quote, I am requesting that you provide these materials to Congress and authorize their public release at this time. And the reason he says it is that to fully capture the context, nature, and substance of the office's work and conclusion. So you did not release those 19 pages at that time. Instead, a couple of weeks later, you released 448 pages, the entire report, which includes those 19 pages. Do I have that timeline correct?
That's right.
So their entire argument is, General Barr, you suppressed the 19 pages that are entirely public, that we have, that we can read, that they know every word of it. And their complaint is it was delayed a few weeks. And that was because of your decision not to release the report piecemeal, but rather to release those 19 pages along with the entire 448 pages produced by the special counsel.
Yes.
If that is their argument, I have to say that is an exceptionally weak argument. Because if you're hiding something, I'll tell you right now, General Barr, you're doing a very lousy job of hiding it. Because the thing that they're suggesting you hid, you released to Congress and the American people. And so if anyone wants to know what's in those 19 pages that are being so breathlessly, oh, Bob Mueller said release the 19 pages. You did. You did it a couple of weeks later. But we can read every word of the 19 pages along with the full report. In your judgment, was the Mueller report thorough?
Yes.
Did they expend enormous time, energy, and resources investigating and producing that report?
Yes.
And the Mueller report concluded flat out on the question of Russian collusion, the evidence did not support criminal charges.
That's right.
And indeed, the Mueller report, if I have these stats right, was compiled by 19 lawyers who were on the team, approximately 40 FBI agents, intelligence analysts, forensic accountants, and professional staff. The special counsel issued more than 2,800 subpoenas, nearly 500 search warrants, more than 230 orders for communication records, almost 50 orders authorizing the use of pen registers, 13 requests to foreign government for evidence, and interviewed approximately 500 witnesses. Is that correct?
That's right.
So, we have investigated over and over and over again, and the substance of the accusations that have been leveled at the president for 2.5 years have magically disappeared. Instead, the complaint is the 19 pages that we can all read that is entirely public, could have been released a few weeks earlier. Oh, the calamity. Let me shift to a different topic, a topic that has been addressed already quite a bit. I believe the Department of Justice under the Obama administration was profoundly politicized and was weaponized to go after political opponents of the president. If that is the case, would you agree that politicizing the Department of Justice and weaponizing it to go after your political opponents is an abuse of power?
I think it's an abuse of power regardless of who does it.
Of course.
Yeah.
To the best of your knowledge, when did surveillance of the Trump campaign begin?
The position today appears to be that it began in July, but I do not know the answer to the question.
It is an unusual thing, is it not, for the Department of Justice to be investigating a candidate for president, particularly a candidate from the opposing party of the party in power.
Yes.
Do we know if the Obama administration investigated any other candidates running for president?
I don't know.
Do we know if they wiretapped
Well,
any
I'm
other?
sorry, I guess they were investigating Hillary Clinton for the email thing.
Do we know if there were wiretaps?
I don't know.
Do we know if there were efforts to send investigators in wearing a wire?
I don't know.
So, General Barr, I would urge, you have had remarkable transparency. You promised this committee you would with regard to the Mueller report. You promised this committee and the American people you would release the Mueller report publicly. You have released the report. Anyone can read it. It's right here. I appreciate that transparency. I would ask you to bring the same transparency to this line of questioning about whether and the extent to which the previous administration politicized the Department of Justice, targeted their political rivals, and used law enforcement and intelligence assets to surveil them improperly.